Hey, this is Pastor Bunjee Garrett, and I want to take some time today to present you with another word of encouragement. Well, it's the 76th anniversary of Israel's independence, and while this ought to be a joyous occasion for Jews all around the world, we actually find ourselves in a time when anti-Israeli hatred is once again plaguing the world, and much like it was during the days of Haman as well as Hitler, the state of Israel is once again becoming the target of those who use anti-Israel propaganda to justify their desire for a Jewish genocide. Now, we ought to expect this sort of propaganda from those who belong to the Muslim Brotherhood, including the Gazan government. I'll remind you, the Gazan government, better known as Hamas, has sworn to obliterate the state of Israel. As a matter of fact, it was in the preamble of their 1988 covenant where they declared this, and I quote, "The Islamic resistance movement is a distinguished Palestinian movement whose allegiance is to Allah and whose way of life is Islam. It strives to raise the banner of Allah over every inch of Palestine." That's right, the stated goal of Hamas is to bring the entire region of the land they call Palestine under submission to Allah according to Sharia law. And with this as the goal, we should take a moment to ask, well, what's their plan for Israel? Well, thankfully, they answered this, and it's in the very next section of this preamble, which begins with the header, and I quote, "On the destruction of Israel." And then it reads in this way: "Israel will exist and will continue to exist until Islam will obliterate it, just as it obliterated others before it." In other words, the goal of Hamas is to annihilate the state of Israel. And with this as their stated goal, we shouldn't be surprised by the pro-Hamas activists who call for the genocide of the Jews as they declare from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Sadly, these chants are not only heard from those who belong to the Students for Justice in Palestine, which is linked to Hamas, but the same chants can be heard from groups like the Jewish Voice for Peace, which is the so-called Jewish wing of the Palestinian Solidarity Movement. According to the NGO Monitor, they say that the agenda of Jewish Voice for Peace is to dilute support for Israel in the Jewish community and the American public at large toward the goal of reducing or eliminating the United States government's economic, military, and political support for Israel. To this end, JVP promotes anti-Israel BDS, which stands for Boycotts, Divestment, and Sanctions, campaigns on U.S. campuses, in academic associations, unions, churches, and in corporate stockholder meetings by deploying the language of demonization and delegitimization. JVP also acts to provide a facade of Jewish legitimacy to these campaigns. That's right, the Jewish Voice for Peace is nothing more than a facade which seeks to demonize the state of Israel and to delegitimize Israel's rightful claim to their land, and that through so-called Jewish voices. In similar fashion, the Biden administration has presented the facade of standing strong with Israel while simultaneously trying to stop Israel from completing their mission to end Hamas. For example, it was just last week when Biden confirmed that he's withholding the sale of 2,000-pound bombs, which would be sold to Israel, but now not so much. And here's how he put it just before the Rafah campaign, and I quote him here: "I made it clear that if they go into Rafah, they haven't gone in Rafah yet. If they go into Rafah, I'm not supplying the weapons that have been used historically to deal with Rafah, to deal with the cities that deal with that problem." In other words, quid pro Joe, again, is unwilling to provide assistance unless everything lines up with what he wants. And he's not willing to provide Israel with the weapons they need to end this war against the terrorists who attacked our ally last October. That's right, it was the day after Biden promised that his support for Israel was ironclad when he promised to withhold the supply of the weapons they need for winning this war against Hamas. Not only that, but according to a report from the Washington Free Beacon, it was the day before that when Biden's State Department informed Congress that it intends to continue bypassing laws that bar the U.S. from selling weapons to nations that boycott Israel. Now, what this means is that the Biden administration has not only announced its intent to cut off U.S. arms sales to our ally Israel, but it's also issued a sanctions waiver to bypass congressional prohibitions on arms sales to a host of Arab nations that boycott the Jewish state, including Hamas ally Qatar and Iran-controlled Lebanon. And listen, all of this is happening after the Biden administration decided not to veto a UN resolution that demands an immediate ceasefire between Israel and the Gazan government, which has been holding hostages since their October 7 attack on Israel. And listen, if all this isn't bad enough, there's now evidence that leads us to believe that the Biden administration has been withholding valuable military intelligence from the Israelis. According to the reports coming from the Washington Post, they apparently received leaked information that the Biden administration has sensitive intelligence regarding the location of Hamas leaders. But they're only willing to share this information if Israel refrains from the Rafah invasion. And so much for ironclad support for Israel. Now, in light of all these things, we should consider the statement that President Biden just made regarding the 76th anniversary of Israel's independence. In a letter that he sent to Israel's President Isaac Herzog, Biden declares this, and I quote, "The United States is proud of our enduring relationship with Israel. As the first country to recognize Israel as an independent state in 1948, our bonds are underpinned by shared democratic values, common interests, and cultural affinities." Biden then went on to add this, and I quote him again, "As I, a lifelong supporter of Israel and the only American president to visit Israel in wartime, made clear after Hamas's attack, the United States' commitment to Israel's security is ironclad." That's right. Biden keeps claiming that his commitment to Israel's security is ironclad. And as we consider, many of his most recent decisions, I'm not so sure that he understands what ironclad actually means. Biden then went on to add this, and I quote here, "It's critical that our countries work together to increase security and peace for Israel and the entire region. I look forward to our nations continuing to work together to forge a brighter future for all our people." Now, as I read this, I can't help but to remember that when they say peace and safety, sudden destruction comes upon them. And so that's where we find ourselves today. And we have to ask, how can Israel be at peace in this region when they're surrounded by Islamic jihadists who have sworn to obliterate them? Without debate, Biden's ironclad support of Israel isn't as ironclad as he would like us to believe. So happy Independence Day, Israel. Rather than standing strong with Israel, Biden is trying to appease those on both sides of this conflict. You see, he wants to appease the pro-Hamas wing of the Democratic Party while simultaneously maintaining his approval with the pro-Israel majority of the American people. And in this way, he's leading our nation into a conflict with the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. As a matter of fact, it's the God of Israel who not only promised to reestablish Israel in the land of promise, but he's also the one who promised to destroy the nations who oppose the apple of his eye. I want to consider how he puts it in Jeremiah chapter 30. It's here where the Lord declares, "Do not fear, O my servant Jacob, says the Lord, nor be dismayed, O Israel. For behold, I will save you from afar, and your seed from the land of their captivity. Jacob shall return, have rest, and be quiet, and no one shall make him afraid. For I am with you, says the Lord, to save you, though I make a full end of all nations where I have scattered you. Yet I will not make a complete end of you, but I will correct you in justice, and will not let you go altogether unpunished." Now from this we can see that there's coming a day when the Lord is going to make a full end of all the nations who conquered Israel and captured their people. And yeah, this includes those who invaded Israel back on October the 7th. That being the case, the leaders of America will do well to realize that those who stand with the enemies of Israel are simultaneously standing against the Lord. And as we've seen in the past, the nations who stand against the Lord, well, they eventually realize that they were standing on the wrong side of history. With that being the case, Christians will do well to celebrate Israel's 76th Independence Day. And as we do, let's share the good news about the true independence, which is received by faith in the finished work of Jesus Christ. Christian, listen, every unbeliever, no matter their nationality, is a slave of sin. And the only way that we can escape the bondage of our fallen flesh is through the spiritual freedom that we receive by faith in the cross of Jesus Christ. And so as we celebrate Israel's Day of Independence today, we must not forget that it's the gospel message of Jesus Christ which is able to save both Jew and Arab alike. That being the case, let's go out and proclaim our dependence on Jesus Christ. And as we do, let's help everyone to understand that Jesus alone can save us from the slavery of our sin. And as we proclaim this good news, the Lord will help us to fight the good fight of faith, and all for the glory of God.